Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch World Cup Roundup 2019. And the other day we took a look at why South Korea really didn't turn, well, I can't say not turn up, but didn't do as well at this World Cup as they have previously. There is another team we need to look at that had a monumentally bad World Cup this year round. Yeah, it's Team Canada, isn't it? Team Canada have always been at the top of Overwatch World Cup action, if you see what I mean. They didn't do too well in 2016, but in 2017 they came second, losing to, yes, the South Koreans, as per usual. And in 2018, they got through their Los Angeles qualifier just behind the United States, got all the way through and lost to China in the semi-finals, and beat the United Kingdom in the bronze medal match to secure a third place. So, second and third place in the previous 2 years is a gosh darn good record, I think you'll find. But this year, yeah, didn't go too well, did it? They failed to get out of their group, not even getting a win on the board. And the problem is, their group, on paper, wasn't all that difficult. They were in Group B this year with China, Denmark, the Netherlands, Russia, and obviously themselves. And they were the only team to fail to pick up a win. They only actually got one map on the board, and that was against the Netherlands, who would eventually actually go through to the knockout stages. They got dumped on by Russia in the first round when XQC was missing in action. They then lost to the Netherlands 2-1, and then were heavily beaten by the Chinese. And yeah, it wasn't all that close against China, and that put them out of the tournament, and then they had to take on Denmark. Denmark were obviously fighting for a place in the knockouts, and they lost 3-0 to them as well. There's a lot to discuss. And it's not quite as clear-cut as South Korea's was. South Korea, you could put down to a main roster issue, right? But with Canada, this is the fascinating thing about this team. They actually had exactly the same team as they had last year. It was Shurk, Agilities, Mangachu, Note, XQC, Banny, and Crimzo. And last year, this team did really well. And it's not all that different from what we saw in 2017 either. Question is, where did it go wrong? The first thing to say is I really don't think the meta favours Team Canada. When you look at XQC, he is a really good arrestor, don't get me wrong, but he prefers the Reinhardt and the Winston, let's be honest. His whole identity was around Winston when he burst onto the scene. That's not really working in their favour. Note, and this is a big point, Note is by no means a awful Sigma, but it really doesn't fall into his comfort zone. And we didn't see the tails of a top-end Sigma, right? And when I'm talking about the tails of a top-end Sigma, I'm talking about if Moira is bursting out a coalescence on the opposition team, then the Sigma is going to rock them, right? That's pretty much what you're going to see at the Overwatch League level at the top end of the Overwatch World Cup. The Sigma, with his rock, is probably going to knock people out of their ults or stuff like that. And we didn't see too much of that from Note, which was an issue slightly, but over the entire team, the coordination looked off, so it's not the DPS line. That's one thing I can say. Although Agilities had his up and down moments, Shurk was popping off at times, big time, right? But we expect that from Shurk. Shurk is Shurk, after all. Agilities had really good moments. Mangachu is Mangachu. So we kind of take the DPS line out of the picture here. Then I look at the support line. The support line is nothing outstanding for Canada, but it never has been, right? It's not perhaps the level of a US support line or a South Korean support line, or maybe even a UK support line when you look at the UK having Cruz, Funny Astro, and Boombox. So, yeah, we could pick apart the support line, but they really didn't do all that badly in the World Cup. They turned up, they did what they needed to do. The problem here I have is the tank line. And especially in this meta, the tank line holds your team together. With that double shield of Sigma Orisa, it holds the team together, and I think it's perhaps where Canada fell a bit short this year. So, let's take a look at it a bit more. So in the first game, they played Russia, and Russia were a seeded team coming into this. They were the 9th seeded team. Canada were the 2nd seeded team, so Canada on paper should win against Russia, and they should be either the 2nd or top team in the group. Whether they lose out to China or not depends on where they're at the time, right? So it was a big shock to see Canada get stomped by Russia. But it wasn't a big shock, because if you watched the game, they didn't have a main tank. It was either Mangachu or Agilities on main tank because XQC was missing in action. Where was XQC? He was streaming Overwatch 2 to 77,000 viewers when I saw it. So I said it in another video in the results roundup. I'm like, if you're going to be a player for an Overwatch World Cup squad, if I was the coach or I was the committee, I'd want your 100% loyalty, right? Commitment. And XQC didn't show that. XQC didn't show that. And I don't think anyone can deny that. I don't like to say it. I think XQC is alright, right? But he didn't show it. He didn't show the full commitment to Team Canada this year. Otherwise, plenty of Overwatch League talent have played Overwatch 2, but also been able to take part in the World Cup. He could have waited, but he wanted to be part of the hype around Overwatch 2 and its announcement and the demos that were at BlizzCon. So he wanted to be on the bandwagon, streaming, and for a streaming career, yes, he absolutely should have been. But he's putting his streaming career before his Overwatch World Cup career, or his Overwatch esports career, or his World Cup team, whatever you want to say. Is that a brilliant look? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. And, to be honest, we'd had rumours about Overwatch 2 for months. So, it was kind of on Team Canada and XQC to say, hey, if this happens, I'm going to want to go and stream that. That's part of my career, right? Do you want to take a backup main tank instead of Mangachu or something? Maybe Team Canada looked at it and said, well, we trust in Mangachu and Agilities to play this role. A classic example is Hydration, right? Although he wouldn't be for Team Canada, Hydration can play a pretty good Orisa. We've seen that in the Overwatch League this season, so sometimes you've got that flexibility with your tanks and your DPS and other people like that. Mangachu used to be a flex player, so Mangachu makes sense, but I did remember seeing Agilities on main tank, so I don't know quite what's happening there. It's kind of weird, and no momentum was built up for Canada in that Russia match because, it was all over the place because they had no main tank. And no matter how good these players are, right, if you're playing a role you're not used to, you don't play week in, week out, it's never gonna feel right, it's never gonna be right, it's never gonna feel right. So that's the first problem you have to look at. And that's firmly on the shoulders of the Canadian Committee and XQC to debate that to the hills. But anyway, then we look at the next game, and the game against the Netherlands. So, the game against the Netherlands, XQC returned from his streaming escapade. And he must have had limited practice time, or warm-up time, although he would have warmed up in Overwatch 2, but it is a different game, and I haven't played it, so it might feel a bit different to the normal Overwatch. But, again, there was a lack of synergy, even with a proper main tank in the team. And it all seemed a bit off. I've seen the highlights for most of it because I didn't see the main streams, right? Because I think Great Britain were streaming at the same time, or United Kingdom. But, so, note Sigma, the coordination still wasn't there, even when XQC came back. There still wasn't that pop-off we expect from the Sigma players, because Sigma players are actually the playmakers a lot of the time in these comps. Less, you get the pop-offs from the Reaper or the Mei or the Doomfist at the moment, but Sigmas can really make plays. You see it from the likes of Choi Hyobin. So, we didn't see too much of that from Note. And as you might remember, Note used to play a lot of D.Va. He was a D.Va main, he can play a decent Roadhog and Zarya, but he's never really been proven on the Sigma, especially in the Overwatch League where we didn't see Sigma all that much in the main season. I think a lot of confidence was lost when they got, body slammed by Russia. And you would think XQC coming back in would buoy the team, right? And I don't think it did. Whether there was a lack of scrim time or stuff like that, I don't know. But XQC is an aggressive main tank, right? He'll walk forward and make space for you. You have got to adapt to that and make sure you go with him. Because if you don't, he's going to die. And I saw that a lot at times, especially against China, where XQC would walk forward and get caught out at times. And you look at the kill feed, a lot of the time, you can see XQC dying first. It might not be XQC's fault. I'm not necessarily accusing XQC here. I'm saying maybe it's his team not fully being aware and moving with him. Because if you move with your main tank and you body slam into them, a lot of the time it can work. I'm not saying the strategy is bad. I'm saying the team didn't seem on the same page for what they were doing. At times you had Shurk or Agility. Agility is a bit different because he's a Doomfist, but sometimes you had Shurk going off on crazy flanks trying to make things happen and then getting caught out. The thing is, a lot of the time it was the fact that Canada's front line of Note and XQC were getting crushed by certain people, right? Facilities popping off in the Netherlands and stuff like that. It was a lot of the time the front line that were coming and bearing the brunt of it all, and once you lose that front line, you're not going to win a game of Overwatch. It's as simple as that. So, in terms of the Note situation, could you look at JNATHYN or something, who was another option for Team Canada in the off-tank position? But again, I don't know what his Sigma's like. He was always known as a really good D.Va player, a really good off-tank player, but I don't know what his Sigma's like, so we can't really tell about that. And I can't recommend a replacement at main tank for Canada because I don't really know too many at the moment. For Canada specifically, if you want to highlight some to me, then please do. But Canada, I also saw some things as well. Going in and committing to fights that were lost. Like, they were lost, and we saw ults committed to fights where they didn't have a chance of winning. They didn't have a chance of winning fights. They'd already lost 2 players in the fight. You should pull out, regroup, and then go back in again with the ults you've got. But those ults were blown with them desperately trying to get some momentum, and then this affected their ult economy. And a lot of the time, another thing you would see is Canada being behind in ult economy. A lot of the time. It was a big factor in a lot of the matches. Against the Netherlands, against China, against Denmark. They looked behind in ult economy a lot. And that's because they blew their ults at times. They really did blow their ults at times. So, another thing I also noticed is a lack of flexibility. Most of the time, you would know what Canada were going to run. They were going to run the Lucio, they were going to run the Orisa, they were going to run the Sigma, maybe a Moira, and then it would always be Doom Reaper. And what stuck out to me is on King's Row against the Netherlands, they kept running Doom Reaper into May Reaper. Now, it can work, don't get me wrong. If the Doom gets the early pick on one of the supports, then you're really going to roll the fight normally. But you've got agilities, right? Why not try and run Banny on the Mercy and agilities on the Pharah? Try and get something done there. If it doesn't work, you can always switch back to the Doom Reaper. I'm not saying that. But perhaps try the Pharah for a little bit instead of the Doom. How would the Netherlands answer that when they're running May, Reaper, Sigma, Orisa, or basically the same comp as you're running, but except May instead of a Doomfist? I don't know how they'd respond to that. Maybe the Netherlands would, but you'd certainly get the first point quicker than they did. I think there was some compositional mismatches or missed opportunities in some respects. A lack of creativity is the best way I would explain it. And it all comes down to perhaps there was a lack of scrim time. Perhaps there was a lack of preparation. Perhaps, I know they had like this boot camp thing in Canada before they went to the Overwatch World Cup, so it seems odd that they would be lacking in scrim time and lacking in preparation. But something has gone seriously wrong for Team Canada this year round, and we might well see a very different Team Canada next year, simply because XQC said that if nothing really changes with Overwatch, it'd probably be his last World Cup. Whether he wants to end on a World Cup quite like this, I don't know. And from what I've heard for Overwatch 2, there ain't going to be a new Overwatch before the World Cup. And probably a lack of updates as well. Then you've got to look at, will Shurk agilities and the likes come back? I don't know at that point. I think Shurk might come back, but the rest of them, I'm really not sure. And whether Note will get in again over the likes of JNATHYN or something, I don't know. It's a lot of don't knows with Canada. To be quite honest, they've capitulated more than South Korea have. South Korea, you know, they were going to fall one day. It was all just a case of when, and it turned out it was this year. I predicted it a year early when I was predicting it last year, unfortunately. But Canada, no one expected Canada to just decimate like they did, especially in a group that on paper was a group they should really get through. If you look at Group A, if they'd lost out to the United States, France, and South Korea, then you could say, GG, it's a difficult year. But this is definitely on Canada's shoulders. They didn't turn up instead of it being a difficult group. So a lot of work in the next year to do for the Canadians. One bonus for Canada is that Toronto Defiant, obviously a team from Canada, have signed up a lot of Canadian talent, Agilities, Shore 4. So that could really benefit Team Canada next year. With those players playing together, the synergy should be able to flourish, and then coordination then comes with it. And hopefully we see a better Canada next year than we have this year. But that was a look at Team Canada and perhaps why they did so badly. I think it literally is just a coordination sort of issue. It all seemed a bit off. And whether that comes down to the coaching, Jane wasn't a coach this year, he was general manager. So whether they were lacking Jane's input or something, who knows? But I am going to leave it here for this one. There is one more Overwatch World Cup video coming up. And it is either tomorrow or the day after, I'm not sure which one. And then there's going to be an Overwatch League transfer roundup as well, because we need to keep up to date with that. And then, God knows, because Overwatch is not going to get much in terms of content in the next few months. Sad face. We're going to have to find something to do. I have an idea though. Anyway, for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.